need elements of legislation. You will still need MPs to help you pass your domestic agenda, and therefore you will need them on side. And by pushing out people on the backbenches, you are potentially creating a thorn in the side of what you want to try and achieve.
So how do you see this playing out? It's very difficult to predict, isn't it? Do you see a general election as inevitable?
Well, I think we're much closer to an election than
rather than a second vote.
Yeah, rather than a second vote, definitely. I don't think that is in anyone's plans within government. But I think the key thing is there's nowhere left to hide now. So a lot of the people who are in government have spent the last few years fighting against the government, you know, not voting with it, throwing stones at government ideas and policy, and now they are the machine, they are the government, so they will have to deliver what has not been deliverable for 3 years in the space of 3 months. So, you know, I do wish them well with that, but I think, you know, when you are opposing things and when you are in government, responsible, they are very different things.
Yeah, and just finally, I mean, how long do you see this government surviving?
Well, I mean, you know, the do or die deadline is the end of October. I think that is really, really important. We need to see what happens then after that. I don't think there is any natural appetite, certainly from any MPs that I talk to head into a general election. But ultimately, if the impasse is still there and the block is within Parliament, then people may say, well, then you need to change Parliament and change arithmetic.
Okay, all right, Mona, say thank you very much indeed. And it is pretty much the end of Boris Johnson's first day as Prime Minister, and most MPs have disappeared for the recess. The one person who has not disappeared is the Glockenspiel player, right alongside us, but we'll put up with him if we really have to.
Trying to minimise it, it is going to be a challenge. You know, you've seen the statements from the EU so far. They're saying we will not renegotiate this, but on the other hand, they don't want no deal, we don't want no deal. And we think it's in both of our interests that we reach a good and equitable arrangement. Nobody differs about what we want to achieve. We all want to protect citizens' rights. We all want to make sure there's no border in the Irish Republic. And we all want no deal. So it must be possible to come to an agreement, but it will require flexibility on both sides. And the EU can't just sit there and say, no, no, no. The current withdrawal agreement has been rejected by large majorities 3 times by Parliament.
I suppose they can sit there and say no.
I suppose they can, in which case, if they do, we will end up in a no deal.
Yeah, and then if Parliament votes down a no deal, what can the strategy be then?
Parliament can't vote down a no deal. Parliament legislated for a no deal when they passed the notification of withdrawal bill, when we gave our notice under the...
find a way to... So many of the people who have left government think they can find a way to prevent a no deal.
Well, I mean, there are various options that they could look at in terms of the future of the government. I hope they won't do that. I hope they will get behind the government and help us to negotiate a good deal. If the whole of the country, if Parliament gets behind the Prime Minister and says very clearly to the European Commission, the current deal will not pass, it has not passed, we've tried 3 times to put it through, we need an improved deal that works for both sides, then I think there's an opportunity. But if they continue to undermine our negotiating strategy, then of course they'll get what they don't want, which is no deal.
Yeah, and could the tactic be a suspension of Parliament? I mean, do you think, what would you think if he went down that road?
I think it's very unlikely, to be honest, but I mean, these are matters for the Prime Minister to decide, but you know, Parliament will have its say. But ultimately, there is no legislative way for Parliament to now decide that they don't want no deal, because it is now a matter for the European Council to decide by absolute majority, by unanimity, whether or not Article 50 is extended or not. That is the extent of their control now.
Okay, and just finally and briefly, I mean, how do you think these next 2 or 3 months play out?
It's going to be
he gets a deal?
It's going to be a busy...
£3 billion. Let's go to the United States now, where the US government has ordered the first executions in decades after a decision to resume the use of the death penalty. Attorney General William Barr announced that a long-dormant policy of using capital punishment would be reinstated. Let's get more from correspondent Cordelia Lynch in Washington. And Cordelia, tell us more about what Mr. Barr has been announcing.
Yes, the Attorney General William Barr announced this news today. He a deal that they're offering the UK is not going to change, so I don't think getting behind him is going to change anything. At the end of the day, nothing has changed. We're still in a Brexit mess, and that's going to continue even if he goes back to the EU. And I think ultimately, when it comes down to it, there's nothing wrong with saying to people, are you happy with what Brexit looks like? Are you happy with leaving the EU? Or would you like another option?
And I mean, like, what sort of second referendum would you be after? Would you be after a, Leave Remain referendum? Are you after a no deal or whatever deals cobbled together, a May deal if no deals cobbled together? I don't quite understand what the second referendum would be about.
Well, I think ultimately our campaign would not be in a position to decide that. It would be the Electoral Commission, but the kind of deal that we would like to see is a deal between, whether it's another deal that Boris has kind of dressed, Theresa May's deal that Boris has somehow dressed up as a different deal versus Remain, or if Boris is really threatening no deal, then no deal versus Remain.
Yeah, and I mean, a general election does seem more likely in the sense that it agreed to stay in contact. Just time to tell you about this week's episode of The Pledge, including regular panellist Rachel Johnson, sister, of course, of Boris, and she gives Sky News viewers an exclusive insight into what she thinks is in store for her brother as she settles in as Prime Minister.
I think there's going to be a huge will on both.
Hasn't deterred the Glockenspiel man. Let's have a look at how the weather looks for the future.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And in case you hadn't noticed, it's been exceedingly hot. We've broken all sorts of temperature records today, but a more westerly wind and thundery showers in the east mean it won't be anywhere near as hot tomorrow. For the moment, Britain will be mostly hot and dry this evening, although there will be a few thunderstorms in the east. Ireland will be cooler with a scattering of showers in the west. Britain will see further potentially thundery showers for a time tonight, mainly over central and eastern areas, while parts of the southwest will see more general heavy rain later. Ireland will keep a scattering of showers in the west, but it'll be dry everywhere else. It'll be hot and humid, very humid for many. Thunderstorms in the southwest will spread northeast across Britain on Friday morning, but the extreme east will stay mainly dry. Elsewhere, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see a scattering of showers, while Western Scotland will be fine.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
That's about it from me. Thanks very much for watching. This is Sky News. Coming up, the Prime Minister faces his first big test after Brussels swiftly rejects reopening Brexit negotiations. More at the top of the hour.
A good strawberry.